Hi guys. It is Thursday. I'm gonna post 2 chapters because I messed up and forgot to post yesterday, so I posted it this morning. But this is the second one for the day. It doesn't really matter as long as you're hopefully either reading the book or watching. That's what I am hoping for. So chapter 11 is a little shorter, and chapter 11 is called Adding Mucho Mas, and it's about 8 pages. So I'm reading it on my kitchen counter, hence our super weird angle and terrible lighting. So, and Jet Berry is, what are you playing? Minecraft or something across the table from me, making funny faces like his mother. So chapter 11, Adding Mucho Mas. After my dishwashing shift the next day, I waited patiently for Carmen in the dining room at La Cocina. I sat at one of the empty tables in the back and watched as guests finished their lunches and went about their days. From where I was sitting, I could hear a few different conversations. They were all talking about the exciting new building. "Can you believe the gym they're going to have?" said Mrs. Prado, a lady who wore too much makeup and always seemed to be wearing workout clothes. "It's going to be amazing," her friend said. I always thought those ladies were really funny, and I liked that they came to the restaurant to eat after exercising, but now I found myself getting annoyed at how loud they spoke. 2 guys who I knew worked at the bank on the corner leaned over their table to join the conversation. "Oye, pero did you see that there's going to be a pool on the roof and one on the second floor? How sick is that? Man, I'm totally buying an apartment there. For sure. It's a dope investment opportunity." I was totally shocked when I overheard Annabelle and George talking. "Maybe instead of buying a house, we look into a place in the new building." "What?" I accidentally blurted out. Annabelle and George turned around, but I put up a menu so they wouldn't see me. I couldn't believe people were eating at La Cocina, enjoying our food, and talking about how cool People Place was going to be. Didn't they realize that if there were a People Place, there would be no La Cocina? Maybe they didn't notice La Cocina was missing from People's plans. The door opened, and Carmen walked in with Abuela, which I didn't expect. The chatter stopped. It was like all 40-plus people in the restaurant quit talking at the same time. That didn't stop Abuela from being Abuela. She took Carmen by the hand and greeted several tables by introducing Carmen. Abuela stroked Carmen's hair as she explained who she was, and Carmen politely accepted the compliments the guests gave her. I felt a little rush of heat in my cheeks when I saw Carmen smiling, but it was probably because I was still hot from being in the kitchen for 5 hours. Aunt Tootie followed Abuela nervously, like a chicken pecking around for seeds. She kept telling her, "Mommy, sientes." But Abuela didn't want to sit down. Greeting guests was what Abuela loved most besides cooking and family. Carmen scanned the restaurant and saw me sitting at the corner table. As she walked toward me, she smiled, and her shiny, colorful braces lit up the room. Her smile was almost too bright, so I looked down at the tabletop and started inspecting the silverware for any spots or stains. "So," she said, "good shift?" "It was fine," I said. "I wish Martine didn't wear Mirabeau. It's nasty, smelling that deodorant mixed with food and dirty plates for 5 hours. I can imagine. So, like I said, I did a little more digging, and look what I found." Carmen pulled up something on her phone and handed it to me. It was an article from a local paper in northern Florida, talking about a word I had never heard before: gentrification. "What does that word mean?" I asked Carmen. "It's when wealthy people come into a neighborhood to redevelop it to increase its value. It usually pushes out people and businesses that have been around for a long time." "Do you think that's what Wilfredo's doing?" "It's what he's been doing in different towns," she said. "Scroll down. See here?" Apparently, Wilfredo Pipo had built other luxury high-rises in coastal towns around the country. They all looked exactly the same as the one he'd proposed in Canal Grove. "Whoa! He's got like 10 other buildings." "Yeah, and that's not the worst part. Here, check this out, she said, pointing. I looked at the page. Request for proposals for the purchase and development of the property owned by the city. It was the same kind of proposal my mom had put in for expansion, but this was a new one. There was a request for the purchase of the land right next to the parking lot, the land that La Cocina was on. I kept reading and my mouth went completely dry. Wilfredo Pipo's name was on the proposal to lease the property. How can he do this? Carmen yelled so loud she startled Mr. Michaels, the guy who owned books and more books. He nearly spilled his ceviche all over himself. Pardon, Carmen said, offering him a napkin. That must be what my mom was talking about on the phone with Mop's dad. But it needs to be approved. The city needs to say yes. Yeah, I said, and realized I hadn't seen Commissioner Garcia at La Cocina with the rest of his staff. I don't know. Something doesn't feel right. Abuela slowly shuffled to our table, carrying 2 large glasses filled to the rim with creamy orange smoothies. Dos batidos de mango, she said, as she handed us the glasses garnished with little mango wedges. Gracias, Abuela, I said. I shifted uncomfortably, like I was literally sitting on top of all the secrets I was keeping from Abuela. She smiled and motioned for me to drink my batito, but I just couldn't do it. I couldn't hold everything in anymore. What happened next, I'm not proud of. It was like popping the lid on a pressure cooker before the whistle signaled that it was time to open it. Carmen chimed in excitedly in Spanish every time I stopped to take a breath. Abuela was silent for a long time. She stroked her silk scarf, and every once in a while she looked like she was going to speak, and finally put me out of my misery. Carmen stared at Abuela like a pastry chef carefully sprinkling coconut shavings onto white chocolate cream cheese frosting. Careful, concentrated, determined. Abuela's lips curled into a smirk and finally broke the silence. Son un buen equipo, she said, pointing from me to Carmen. Something about Abuela saying Carmen and I made a good team made me think about Abuela's letter. When did they start thinking of themselves as a good team? I shook my head and tried to focus. Abuela, what do we do? I asked. Habla con tu mamá, Arturo. I tried to tell Abuela that talking to my mom was pointless. Mom was too busy, and she'd probably just tell us to keep business as usual. Abuela, we could lose the restaurant. She looked serious for a moment and glanced at Carmen again. Te dije como tu abuelo y yo nos conocimos, Arturo. Yes, Abuela, I told her, wondering why in the world she was talking about meeting Abuelo for the first time. Pero, she said, sabes que pasó después. I didn't know what happened after they'd first met because I hadn't read any other letters. Carmen pressed her to tell the story, and I started to get impatient with Abuela. Now was not the time to tell family stories. But I knew better than to interrupt Abuela, so I kept my mouth shut while tapping my fingers on the bottom of the table. Abuela said that after she agreed to a first date with Abuelo, they became inseparable. Abuelo would pick her up at the laundromat, and together they folded clothes for her entire family. Afterward, they would hop into Abuelo's taxi and drive all the way to Abuela's house, where her mother, grandmother, aunts, and uncles and cousins all lived. Y después, she said, cocinaba una cena para él. She cooked a meal for Abuelo every time he dropped her off at home. Abuela's home, it turned out, was kind of unusual. Her family ran a paladar, which is a restaurant inside someone's house. People from all over the city and plenty of foreigners came to visit her family's paladar. Abuela was one of the best cooks around, and she was only 20 years old. Abuela laughed. Pero tu abuelo no era buen cocinero. Abuela wasn't so great of a cook, apparently. I remembered how she'd said he'd burned the steak once. He helped the paladar by serving customers, cleaning dishes, and greeting people, while the rest of Abuela's family chipped in. chipped in where they could. It sounded a lot like how things were run at La Cocina now. Nos divertimos mucho, she said, remembering how much fun it was. 1 year after they first met, Abuelo and Abuela got married. She smiled and took my hand out from under the table. Lo más importante, she said, es el amor y la fe. But love and faith weren't going to save the restaurant. What we needed was a plan. We needed to get... What are you doing? Judberry in the mix. What we needed was a plan. We needed to get the family together. We needed to get the community involved. Why wasn't Abuela making sense? I know, Abuela, but the restaurant, the neighborhood, we have to fight for it. Arturo, she said, staring at me with her blue-gray eyes, hay mucho más que eso. She got up and said she wanted to go home because she was feeling a little tired. Before we left, Abuela said goodbye to every guest in the dining room in her style, stroking faces, caressing hair, and squeezing shoulders. We walked down the hallway to the kitchen, and she stopped in front of the wall of photographs. She pointed to an old one of her and Abuelo, who was wearing an apron and cap, his big ears sticking out. He was shorter than Abuela, but you could tell he felt like the tallest man in the world. He was smiling with pride at Abuela and her tray of arroz con mariscos, standing in front of the restaurant, the first restaurant they'd ever run together. Abuela coughed more than usual on our walk home. We slowed our pace, but it didn't seem to help. By the time we arrived, Abuela had serious trouble catching her breath. Let's get her inside, I said, and handed Carmen the keys. She quickly opened the door, and a blast of freezing cold air from the AC hit our faces. I walked Abuela to her bed. Abuela, are you okay? Agua, por favor. Un poco de agua, she said between coughs. Carmen bolted to the kitchen and brought back some water while I dialed my mom. Mom, I said, while Carmen gently lifted Abuela upright and held the cup to her mouth, Abuela won't stop coughing. Okay. I hung up and slowly rubbed Abuela's back like my mom told me to. Her cough slowed down, but my heart sped up. Be okay. It was the only thought in my mind. Abuela closed her eyes, held her breath, and didn't move. Abuela, I yelled. Finally, she turned to me, looking dazed. Estoy bien, mi amor, she said, slowly grasping for the glass of water. She reclined. I reached for her palm at the same time Carmen did, and we touched. I went to pull away, but Abuela closed Carmen's hand in mine as her breathing started to steady. All right, guys, that's chapter 11. I'll have chapter 12 for you tomorrow, probably from school, most likely. So, and I will have a challenge for you. I'll post it in our groups. The challenge will be a homework pass in this for this video for chapter 11. So there will be a homework pass possibility for the 2020-2021 school year from our video today. And I'll put the question in your group chats and when I send the links. See you guys tomorrow.